What does freedom cost for Algeria? The price was measured in blood. Between 1954 and 1962, one of the 20th century's deadliest independence wars unfolded. Some Algerian sources estimate over 1 million deaths. French historians suggest lower numbers, but no one disputes the scale of the devastation. Entire villages were erased. Families disappeared. A nation was reborn through violence. This is the story of Algeria's war for independence, and why its legacy still echoes today. To understand this war, we have to go back to 1830, when France first invaded Algeria. Over the next century, Algeria wasn't treated like a distant colony, it was legally absorbed into France itself. This brought hundreds of thousands of European settlers, known as the Pieds Noirs, who moved in and took control. They dominated the fertile land, held political power, and ran the economic systems. Meanwhile, the Algerian Muslim population, who were the vast majority, found themselves with limited rights in their own homeland. Land ownership shifted dramatically. Wealth flowed unevenly. By the mid-20th century, a system of deep inequality was firmly in place, and the pressure for change was building to a breaking point. That breaking point arrived on November 1, 1954. The newly formed National Liberation Front, or FLN, launched a series of coordinated attacks across Algeria. This wasn't a quiet request for talks, it was a loud and clear declaration. The message was simple: independence would be won, not negotiated. France's response was swift and forceful. What started as scattered acts of violence quickly escalated into a full-scale, brutal war. But this wasn't a conflict fought on traditional battlefields with clear front lines. The war was everywhere, in the winding streets of the cities, in the remote mountain villages, and in ordinary civilian neighborhoods. It was a war without a front. By 1956, the conflict had engulfed the capital itself. The Battle of Algiers began. Bombings rocked cafes, markets, and public spaces, spreading terror among the population. The French military responded by deploying elite paratroopers, and their counterinsurgency tactics grew increasingly harsh. The battle became infamous for its widespread use of torture, brutal interrogations, and forced disappearances. It was a dark and desperate struggle for control of the city. France's goal was to completely crush the rebellion. The FLN's goal was to make the occupation unbearable, to make the cost of staying too high. Tragically, civilians were caught in the crossfire, victims of both sides. The war had become intensely psychological, a battle for hearts and minds fought with fear and violence. While the cities were rocked by this urban guerrilla warfare, the situation in rural Algeria was just as devastating, if not more so. The French army implemented a strategy of population control. Entire villages were forcibly relocated into controlled zones, designed to cut off the FLN rebels from their civilian support base. To achieve this, farms were destroyed, homes were burned, and entire communities were uprooted. The human cost of these policies was immense, leading to widespread suffering and displacement. When we talk about the number of deaths, the figures are still debated. Algerian sources often cite a number exceeding 1 million people. French historical estimates tend to be lower, in the hundreds of thousands. But the exact number doesn't change the horrifying reality. A generation was scarred by violence, loss, and trauma that would define their lives and the future of their nation. This brutal war didn't just tear Algeria apart. It deeply divided France as well. Public opinion at home was fractured. On one side, many demanded a total military victory, urging the government to crush the rebellion at any cost. On the other side, a growing movement of intellectuals, students, and politicians called for an end to the violence and a negotiated peace. The political instability caused by the war was so severe that it brought down several French governments. In the midst of this crisis, a figure from France's past returned to power in 1958, Charles de Gaulle. He was seen as the only person who could restore order and find a way out of the Algerian quagmire. Initially, he promised to keep Algeria French. But even a leader as powerful as de Gaulle eventually had to face a difficult reality. This was a war that could not be won, at least not politically. The Algerian will for independence was unbreakable, and the cost of continuing the fight was becoming unsustainable for France, both financially and morally. After years of grueling violence, secret negotiations finally began. These talks led to the signing of the Evian Accords in March 1962, a ceasefire was declared, finally silencing the guns. A referendum on independence was held a few months later. The result was a foregone conclusion. The Algerian people voted overwhelmingly for their freedom. On July 5, 1962, after 132 years of French rule, Algeria officially became a sovereign nation. The celebrations were euphoric, but independence did not magically erase the trauma of the war. The consequences were immediate and profound. Fearing retribution, nearly 1 million European settlers, the Pieds Noirs, fled the country in a matter of months. Entire communities that had existed for generations fractured overnight. The war was over, but its scars remained. Algeria emerged as an independent state, but it was deeply wounded. The new nation faced immense challenges. Political tensions simmered within the victorious FLN, and the economy, long structured around colonial interests, needed to be completely rebuilt. The war became the foundational story of the new Algeria, shaping its national identity, its politics, and its worldview for decades to come. For France, the loss of Algeria forced a painful reckoning with its colonial past and its place in the world. The war left a deep and lasting wound on the French national psyche, one that still influences its politics and society today. Globally, Algeria's war for independence became a powerful symbol for anti-colonial movements across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. It proved that even the most powerful empires could be successfully challenged through armed struggle. However, it also served as a sobering example of just how violent and devastating that path to freedom could become. The lessons from Algeria are complex and vital. We see how movements for freedom and self-determination can inspire incredible hope and resilience. But we also see how wars of liberation, born from injustice, can leave behind lasting scars, cycles of violence, and unresolved trauma for generations. Algeria gained its independence, a victory celebrated as a triumph of a people's will. But the immense cost of that freedom remains an inseparable part of its story, its identity, and its memory. History remembers the victories, but it must never forget the price. Thank you for watching. If you found this history meaningful, please consider subscribing for more stories that shape our world.